My name is Mary McCarthy and I was born in rural Ireland in 1951.
This is Trish. She was part of the first group of women who studied at All Hallows University. She studied theology alongside a group of all men, mostly priests, and during her entire studies, she was looked down upon because she was a woman. This is Helen. She worked for a semi-state company that was connected to the Labor Department. She was victim of anti-women laws when she was married in 1972, and she was forced to give up her job. And lastly, this is Maria. In the early 70s, she worked in the Department of Post and Telegraphs in the Central Telegraph Office GPO in Dublin. During this time, women and men were not on equal footing, they were not allowed to work the same hours or positions, and they were not paid equally.
An only girl with 3 brothers, so my father wouldn't allow me to wear trousers, even though I pleaded with him to let me wear trousers. He said, no, there are enough boys in the family. However, in hindsight, looking back, I can see now that maybe his attitude was a little bit adverse to women. That girls were for homemaking and childbearing, and that a woman's place essentially was in the home, with the result that there were things on the curriculum like knitting and sewing. We knit socks, we knit jumpers, we sewed all sorts of dresses and household cloths and linens and things to mass every single day in school, and we had to wear what they call a mantilla, which was a kind of a lace covering that we put on our heads. You couldn't enter a church at the time without having some sort of head covering. That was for females. And then to 1972, I got married, and I worked in a foreign embassy here in Dublin, but we were governed by Irish law, and when you got married, you relinquished your job and you gave it up in favour of, unmarried young women. But that was okay, because I lived in a very dingy bedsit flat, which was literally only half a room. It was divided by a partition, so I could hear everything that was going on the other side.
Helen also had to give up her job when she married in April 1972. This was a consequence of the marriage bar, which banned any married women to apply for or hold down a job. This was due to the bond between the church and the state, which contributed to the perpetuation of the traditional view of Irish women. The Catholic Church believed that the Holy Family structure was critical for the maintenance of the Irish economy and society. The role of the woman was to stay at home and take care of the children, and many women suffered from this. Maria worked for the GPO in Dublin, and she says that there were many office romances, and this is actually how she met her husband and how many of her friends also met their husbands. But unfortunately, she also had to quit her job when they married.
And women, I suppose, between the 50s and the 70s, we were brought up to be virtuous, modest, and moral. If you were seen to be kind of sleeping around or anything like that, that was absolutely a no-no. You had to be a virgin to get married, otherwise your husband would have been marrying used goods, as we were classed as the time, another put down for women.
Trish grew up with many sisters and a strong influence from her mother, but also a strong influence from religion. When she studied theology at All Hallows, she was studying the same degree as most priests would be. She did not feel welcomed or accepted and felt that she didn't have her place there. One time, she says that during Mass, she was placed in the same row as a priest who was known to be unaccepting towards women. During the whole service, he did not look at her, turning his cheek to her. The pressure she felt was such that she had to take a break in her studies. But she was able to come back a few years later and complete her degree. The fight for a right to contraception for all in Ireland has been a long fight over the decades. It started in 1979 when the Health Family Planning Act allowed the sale of contraceptives in Ireland, but only upon presentation of a prescription. Then, in 1983, the Eighth Amendment of the Constitution of Ireland was passed, which recognized the unborn as having a right to life equal to that of the mother. As such, abortions could only be legally conducted in Ireland if they occurred as the result of a medical intervention performed to save the life of the pregnant woman, and later, due to legislation, this risk to the woman's life also included risk from suicide. In 1985, it became allowed to sell condoms and spermicides to people over 18 in Ireland without having to present a prescription. And then, in 1993, the sale of contraceptives in Ireland without a prescription also became legalized. Fast forward to 2018, when the Eighth Amendment of the Constitution of Ireland, which recognized the unborn as having a right to life equal to that of the mother, was repealed by referendum. Feminist campaigning contributed to a positive outcome in the referendum, which resulted in a majority yes vote. The Health Regulation of Termination of Pregnancy Act 2018 came into effect in 2019 and permits terminations to be carried out up to 12 weeks of pregnancy, or where there is a risk to the life or of serious harm to the health of the pregnant woman.
Contraception began to be a little bit of a problem for me, and of course contraception at the time was a no-no in the Catholic Church. Maybe from about 1976 you could get condoms and you could get the pill, but that pill didn't actually suit me at the time, so I had to use natural contraception. And I remember my poor mother in the 1950s, when she had her last child, she actually had to sleep in the children's room. She had to leave her husband's bed, and for the next maybe 20 years, until she had her menopause, she slept separately from my father, and that was Irish way of contraception. It's desperate to think of it, And the only question I remember from that interview was this one: how are you going to manage your 6 children and work? But at this stage now, I had the confidence of having brought up 6 children and battling for them every hand's turn. So I just replied to him, I said, I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you if I couldn't manage my job and 6 children. And I said, what's more, if I was a man, you wouldn't have asked me that question. Now, I certainly thought that was going to, be X across my file and I wasn't going to get that job, but in fact I did.
During Maria's time at the GPO, she did not have access to the same opportunities as men. The office operated on a 24-hour basis, and yet women were not allowed to work between the hours of 8 p.m. and 8 a.m., even though these hours paid much more than during the day. Equal pay did not exist, even though they held the same grades and carried out the same clerical duties as their male colleagues. The salaries were not compatible, and women were also not allowed to wear trousers in the office. Even though Helen had to quit her job because she was married, as she was very good at her job, she was actually offered a 6-month contract, but it held 3 stipulations. First, she was no longer eligible to be part of the salary structure. She was not included in pension contributions, or was she eligible to salary increases. She was not subject to promotional opportunities, meaning that she had 0 chance of moving up in the company, and there was also no guarantee that the contract would be renewed after 6 months. Helen did accept this contract as she wanted to continue working, but she faced many discriminations in the workplace. She told me that once at a work event, the name tag at her seat was inscribed with her husband's name, and upon seeing that, she crossed it out and wrote down Helen. This was very shocking to one of her male coworkers who simply did not understand why she would do such a thing.